Hi all, I'd like to ask an interesting question today and try and discuss it with example games. The interesting question is why play, in inverted commas, the main lines of openings? So the term main line, it doesn't mean like side variations of openings. So I'll try and give a concrete example of what I think a main line is. So like e4, c5, I think the main line here, the main line move, is considered to be knight f3. Now, why would it be considered to be the main line move to play knight f3? Well, the idea is usually to play d4. So say black plays d6, then usually you play d4. So knight f3 is considered main line because it has this idea of exchanging the centre pawn for the flank pawn in the Sicilian. That was easy to say that this is like mainline, and they call it like the open Sicilian because you're opening up the game. But there's also like the closed Sicilian, so you could play knight c3 and then aim to keep the position closed and not play d4. So for example, you could play this closed variation, and okay, have you done serious damage to your position by playing it in such a manner here? So you've just fianchettoed your bishop and you've kept the position closed. So you haven't played the main line, but what does each kind of opening do for you? If you checked on Wiki, I tried to find an answer to this question of what is the main line. It's like trying to ask the question, what is the meaning of life, the universe and everything, it seems. I don't think anyone knows anymore. I think we have opening explorers, for example, which give us, statistical probabilities. For example, knight f3, knight c6. What would you consider? This is a trickier question. What would you consider the main line to play here? If black's intent, giving the signal that they're going to play the Sicilian sveshnikov, okay. The most trodden on path statistically is still d4, but if you don't know like the opening theory of the Sicilian sveshnikov, you might be in trouble if you follow this as the main line, the most trodden path. And instead, in recent years, an alternative, second most popular move on chessgames.com is now bishop b5, which is also being termed like an anti-sveshnikov. So there are these opening trends and fashions as well against different opening systems to be factored in. So like, the most played openings in the last 2 years is going to be different to what was played, in different eras of chess. And really, when you play main lines, I think in this example of, say, the Sveshnikov, which I used to play as black, I welcomed players with white, if we take black's perspective, playing d4 because I read up on stem games on the Sveshnikov, and I enjoyed playing the imbalances which the opening created. So for example, here, so I began to know that there were two main moves here: bishop takes f6 and knight d5. And if bishop f6, you kind of accepted double pawns, and play might go like this. And okay, so I welcomed that. If people wanted to play the main line against my Sicilian Sveshnikov, I welcomed that. But then this bishop b5 reared its ugly head, and maybe I blame Paul Georgiou. He popularised it before all the Grandmasters. I think the Grandmasters were secretly looking at games of amateurs and finding out systems which would help them win against fellow Grandmasters. So that's a little joke, by the way, and I doubt it. But for some reason, bishop b5 became popular as an alternative approach against knight c6, and to even be termed anti-Sicilian sveshnikov. There's another name for it, which there's a specific names for all these lines. But if you, for example, wanted as white to play the Sicilian dragon, then you're talking about loads and loads of theory. Well, both sides need to have very good memories or something to know all the latest games in, say, the Sicilian dragon, in the main line, in inverted commas, where white is going to castle queenside, you know, there's just tons and tons of theory. I think bishop c4 is still popular, and it goes something like this, and who knows after that. I'm not a dragon specialist, but you know, Chris Ward's a dragon specialist, for example. But you know, the main lines, we can see that sometimes they incur this onus of having to know tons and tons of stem games, not only from the past, but also keep up to date with tons and tons of stem games. So here's another example. In the French defence, I don't know what you could consider actually the main line against the French defence as clear cut. In this position, would it be the winawer with knight c3, or would it be the tarrasch with knight d2? Now both moves are heavily trodden, and also very popular online, it seems. The most popular move seems to be ed. Now maybe it's because people don't want to know all the theory and just play ed because it simplifies the position with a symmetrical pawn structure. So it represents low learning overheads, because I don't think the importance of new games coming out are going to radically alter the strategic picture here. Black could attempt to play violently and maybe castle queenside, but even then, you know, white's got c3 and b4. You know, there's problems for black. So this kind of low overhead approach is interesting compared to knight c3 or knight d2. In fact, I think some GMs, when talking about openings like the caro-kann, have recommended like an exchange here to avoid having to learn tons of theory and say bishop d3. This is an easy to play system against the caro-kann. Is it mainline? No. Is it easy to keep abreast of all the games you know, emerging around the world? And now we've got like the week in chess, whatever. Yes, it probably is easier. So what is really the benefit of knowing all the mainline opening theory anymore for either side, when people are really tempted now to just avoid it anyway? In fact, in the last London Classic, someone joked, you know, I come to this tournament and try and play Sicilian, and all you English guys, you avoid the Sicilian. So he was an Italian just visiting, you know, the London Classic, and he's right. You know, people are playing all sorts of things. Unfortunately, you know, Murray Chandler wrote this book on the c3 Sicilian, and this boring, dull move became popular. And even really classy players like Howell are playing, you know, David Howell playing c3. They're specialising it. So, you know, you learn all this theory in your main lines, and it all gets avoided. You know, or Susan Lalick might play knight c3, or someone else will play maybe even this Morris Smith, which can transpose, of course, into the c3 Sicilian lines. When black plays this, you're getting a transposition into c3 Sicilian territory. So really, it seems that for a lot of black systems, there are white systems which avoid playing the main line. So obviously they give other advantages. And in particular, if we flip the board again, I mean, I've been experimenting, as you can see, with b3 recently, because I think it's I thought it was an interesting game against d5 and c6. But two of my recent over-the-board games are demonstrating otherwise. And now I'm leaning towards, you know, maybe when people play e6, I should actually consider, you know, one of the main lines against the French defence. Now what I'm going to do next is just run through a quick overview of what statistically is popular. Let's take that angle. If we consider what's statistically popular, that might give a clue of what main lines are. But also I think main lines, to be statistically used a lot, there must be an underlying theoretical basis. Now, the clearest that I can come up with recently from a recent video was against the caro-kann, actually, where I indicated actually, and I had a recent GM win on the ITC, in not in this variation like Panov Botvinnik or whatever, but actually in this variation, I think there's actually an underlying theoretical basis, which my good friend Paul Georgiou recently explained to me on the phone. And basically he said it very simply, that white is using the first four ranks of the board, and black is like huddled, well, with that advanced pawn there, black's huddled on the first three actually. Now I'm colouring all these squares in, and maybe this will motivate you to actually play the main line of the caro-kann, which is this kind of exchange of light squared bishops, and you do get more territory than black. So yeah, we can continue, you know, with e6 and say bishop d2, bishop d6, castles, and basically you know, you end up with potentially you know, more territory than black, and black plays c5 at some point, and you should really know what to do. And sometimes, you know, you want to exchange off the dark square bishops as well, because there might be some, you know, dark square issues that I mentioned before. So the main line has a theoretical basis to it. You know, against the French defence, why was the winawer so popular? Was this because, you know, in the Soviet school of chess, that Mikhail Botvinnik was popularising imbalance theory, which now Silman is now talking about as well. But in imbalance theory, basically, to win more games, you have to be prepared to give the opponent possibly winning advantages in exchange for your compensation. So in the winawer, the main line winawer, you know, black is giving you know, white the two bishops, but there's potential counterplay later and potentially better endgames. And Mikhail Botvinnik was winning lots of games actually in the endgame and breaking from the queenside later, you know, keeping his king safe, you know, casting queenside. And he was world champion for a long time, so he was like using the winawer. And I think actually Fischer had a relatively bad success rate playing the winawer as white. So sometimes the main lines create these imbalances, and I suppose it's the imbalances which are the underlying attraction for why people would play certain systems. And maybe there's an attraction to playing the tarrasch, that you want to have like more space in the centre. Like here, you might want to aim for more space, so you'd play like this, because fundamentally, as well as being a trodden path, there's an underlying theoretical basis here that if you can maintain this pawn chain, then you've got more space. But this is all offset. This continual struggle really that I have is that you need to be a bit of a bookworm and very good, ideally, with your memory to be able to remember all the stem games and keep on top of the new stem games. So this massive overhead, it seems, does promise this idea, at least in these systems of like against the French, that you have these certain imbalances which fundamentally give you certain advantages and the opponent certain advantages. And if you were lazy, and a lot of online players are against the French, and they just play the exchange, they're basically killing off the imbalances in the position with this symmetrical pawn structure. And the same with this low overhead system, which I've seen recommended against the caro-kann, is almost killing off some of the dynamic potentials in the position, but it's not as severe, because actually white has semi-open e file and black has semi-open c file, and if white plays c3 later, then black potentially has a minority attack plan later. So there's clear distinctive plans, even if you don't play like main lines of systems. And in fact, you can actually even play like the exchange French with a vengeance with c4. I think Kasparov has played that. So even in the offbeat lines, there's still interesting ideas that you can back them up with. So this comes to my point: who on earth is playing the main lines? Is it just also what the top professionals are playing? Because let's take other examples. Against d4 in the Capablanca era, it seems that this was, you know, the thing to do. The Queen's Gambit declined. But recently, we all know now that, well, the Queen's Bishop is an issue, and that had to be continually resolved in some ingenious way in a lot of games. And Capablanca was content to play this because actually, you know, he didn't really place too much value on learning opening theory, because he found it inaccurate in his time most of the time. And also he valued that link to the endgame, and he even said, recommended to friends and everyone, really learn the endgame first, then the middle game, then the openings, because back in his time, where the Queen's Gambit declined was kind of the main line, in inverted commas, you know, there wasn't so much theory lurking around, and you didn't have to follow, you know, the latest games from the week in chess, or the latest news around the world was instantly available and analysed with engines and all that. But nowadays, we recognise that, unfortunately, the Slav, which is slightly dull, has taken over as a kind of mainline system against d4. But is there a fundamental basis for this? I guess there is, because it still contests the centre, a fundamental concern, but also it doesn't hem in that bishop. So maybe there is a justification for the Slav defence becoming the mainline approach to d4. Now, recently, because of the London Classic, I bought 2 volumes of Avrukh, and the motto of the books, Quality Chess motto, as a book publisher, is something like, play the main lines, avoid getting bad positions, or something like that. But Avrukh's recommendations are actually more of the Catalan variety, rather than what I considered to be pure main lines. So often he's like, you know, even like against the Grunfeld, recommending, so the Grunfeld defence, for example, recommending like early fianchettos. Actually, don't take my word for this. Check this out. But there might be like G3's recommended at some point. Against different systems, it seems G3 was a pet, you know, a recurring idea within that. But that book wasn't really claiming main lines. That was just the motto of the book publisher called Quality Chess. So basically, what have I said so far? I think there's a huge controversy, it seems, and no one's actually tackling this question of what are the main lines? Why are the main lines the main lines? Are they what the top players are playing? Are they what statistically is being played? Are they what statistically is getting the biggest success rates? I mean, and also, you know, in the context of online chess, why would you want to play main lines in 5-minute games? I mean, if you play something unusual, surely the opponents set new problems that they have to think about. Like, you know, I've demonstrated a bit that, you know, even the wing gambit can win, or the king's gambit especially is particularly dangerous. And yes, it wouldn't be considered main line. You know, the Roy Lopez would, but you know, if you go into the Roy Lopez, here's another example. You know, there's the dreaded, you know, Marshall. If you play this stuff, you could be just not doing yourself as big a favour as you imagined, especially if your opponent has just swallowed and memorised a book on the Marshall Gambit. So you've played into this main line, and then you end up wasting 2 hours of your life getting like hack attacked on the king's side or something, because you forgot the theory at some point here, or the opponent has some new game somewhere. Maybe Adams has played a new manoeuvre with the Marshall. So what was the point in playing the main line here? So you might have some regrets. Well, you know, you might say, actually, a lot of Grandmasters are now avoiding this, and they're playing A4 here. Actually, there's an engine game I'm going to look at soon with this A4. So that's kind of anti, and they call that anti-Marshall. These things pop up with anti in their name. Instead of playing the main line, why don't you play this anti-system? Anti-sveshnikov, anti-Marshall. Are the anti-systems taking over as the main lines? But I just want to touch on another subject. In the recent London Classic, I'm Michael Hennigan, who once sneaked in to win the British Championship. Him and David Norwood are very naturally talented players, and also you know, they're sometimes playing openings which are nothing to do with the main line. Because what if your approach to the game was to say to yourself, maybe like Capablanca in a way, that he wanted to first be brilliant at the end game and then the middle game, and if he got a reasonable position for the opening, at least he'd be able to you know, exploit that, rather than having a great position from the opening but continually failing after. But those were in the days of Capablanca. But you know, look at this game. Michael Hennigan was playing, okay, a lowly rated IM, but you know, sometimes he has very good results. Jack Rudd, he plays just G3. Unfortunately, in the same tournament with G3 against another Grandmaster, you know, he got massacred. But G3 worked to treat against Jack Rudd, because really, you know, there's a question here of underlying chess ability, which Capablanca was alluding to in the middle game and end game. So it looks as though White's got nothing from the opening, yeah. But Jack Rudd gets a bit impatient and maybe, you know, improvises, because if you don't play main lines and people improvise, then also, you know, they might not actually be playing very good moves while they improvise. So although, you know, Black's seemingly aggressive idea here is something I would use, this A3 and B4 is a good antidote maybe to try and break open the B file and exploit the bishop. So this is completely away from mainline opening theory, just playing G3, letting Black have aggressive intentions. And we see here Black again aggressive intentions. It's going to give the fishing pole neat little trick here. Is that going to work against Michael Hennigan? Well, here the C file's just been ripped open because of that B4. So there's certain bad news on the horizon for Black. Even though he's got his fishing pole trick in, looks like aggression, you know, knight D4. But this is now snapped up HG, allowing queen takes C4. And now this exchange. And now Black's king came under a very quick, sudden, deadly attack, because Michael just played bishop E3. And now rook C7, rook on the 7th. You know, how many mainline openings would you get such major trump cards as your bishops pointing menacingly at the opponent's king? Everything, in fact, pointing at the opponent's king. Now, can you honestly say in mainline opening theory you'd have such a brilliant position as this? And this was from 1G3. So Black didn't last too long here. He played rook takes A3, and after queen D7, bishop takes B4. The last move was E5, forcing resignation. And I think one of the reasons is that bishop takes G2, there's rook C8, mating. So this game demonstrates, and I think Norwood was playing G3 with great success as well, and he wasn't really an opening parrot. And, you know, he still became a grandmaster. But, you know, if you have a very strong middle game and end game, and I guess this echoes Capablanca, that, you know, he wasn't that bothered about opening theory in any case. But, you know, you can build up massive trump cards in any case, especially, it seems, you know, when the opponent improvises, because, you know, they're out of their pet systems, they're out of the mainline books, you know. So what does mainline theory serve? Does it serve, you know, the ability to sell lots and lots of chess books on all these apparently claimed main lines that you're supposed to be playing? We have this onus on us all time of what we're supposed to be doing. Is it going to give us happiness? I don't know. I'm not convinced. What I find happy in my chess at the moment is playing gambits and positional sacrifices. And I love my online chess as well, because that's so convenient. And I love, you know, the Hearts Congress, where I played the King's Gambit in one, and you know, other gambits and other, and exciting openings like the King's Engine. I don't want to play the Slav. I'm aware the Slav defence is now the main line to D4, but I refuse to play it at the moment. And some grandmasters like Summerskoll, he used to play the Slav, and now he's playing more fun, it seems. He's playing Dutch defences and other stuff, and he seems to be enjoying the chess again. So I think the main lines can't be at the expense of your enjoyment of the game. And if that's the case, you know, why aren't gambits more popular? I raised this question on the Chess Cube Cafe earlier, which I invite you to come and discuss this subject with me. If you want to come to Chess Cube later, I'll give you a link again to that video, the King's Crusher Cafe on Chess Cube, because I really would love to discuss this question with you about main lines. You know, what are their purpose? I see that in some main lines there's a theoretical underpinning of certain weaknesses from an opening, but in other cases, you know, why not just have fun, especially at club level? If the opponent plays the Sicilian, you know, why not play the wing gambit or the Morris Smith gambit, you know, get a lead in development, and then, you know, hopefully you're going to find tactics which will tear the opponent's king apart later, you know. Or there's other systems like you know, the Grand-prix attack, which used to be popular. Wasn't it David Rumens had fantastic success with Grand-prix, you know, like attack systems with, you know, F5s later, and it was very dangerous, like for the Black King. I think he wrote a book on that. So there's all these like the sidelines, are the sidelines, you know, not worthy of us to play? And if so, why not? So I hope there's some food for thought. There is some downsides to just playing one G3, by the way. I guess I should show you the other game, which was a bit of a disaster in the same tournament of Michael Hennigan. So I'm just going to close this game and hopefully, whoops, we'll have a look at another Hennigan game against Neil McDonald. So he played G3 against Neil McDonald, who was higher rated. But this is the case, was the game lost because of the opening, or just because the opponent's sometimes more dangerous, you know, tactically on that particular day? So Neil McDonald played black. Okay, he equalised kind of easily, and worse than that, black managed to get a good attack on Michael's king side, unfortunately. But there was a very nifty move, actually, which I'm sure wasn't parroted particularly against this system, or maybe it was part of preparation. But the nifty move comes up here very shortly, doubling on f4, and it seems like queen and bishop and rook are tied down to f4 here. And now black actually, after b4, okay, make sure the queenside initiative is not going anywhere. And after rook f2, here's the nifty move, which brings back black a decisive quick attack, almost as quick as Michael's attack was successful. He's going down in this system now after queen h4, because his queen's stuck over there. Black's king's got no issues, but look at the white king, it's got issues. So here's a downside of playing, you know, maybe not a mainline, or that g3 isn't the golden bullet either. I just wanted to make that clear. The game ended here, so that was a bit of a crush. There was a bit of a problem here because bishop takes h3 check and then winning the bishop, it was getting nasty. So yeah, you can't, I'm not trying to say play g3 or you know, nothing has got a guarantee in chess, but maybe what I'm saying is we don't have to be a slave to the main lines. Anyway, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.